ultimately, if their energy bills are stable, are secure, and they know what they're paying, that will help Stonewater in the long term, because it means that our customers are more likely to be able to afford the rent that they're being charged, because there's that control of the energy cost.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler, coming to you as we're recording this in Belfast, but by the time this comes out, I will be back in Turlough, and I'm joined this week by Mary James. How are you, Mary?
I'm good.
Very good. Well, we've got an interview with Matthew Crucifix this week. Matthew is with Stonewater, and it's a housing provider who's providing council housing for, this is basically community and affordable housing for an organisation in Somerset, where I was very fortunate to be able to visit recently. So we will get into that soon. But before we do, we've got a few people to thank. So thank you very much, as always, to our stakeholder partner at the Passive House Accelerator, NYSERDA, and also to founding sponsors 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwall, Zola Windows, and also our champion sponsors, Buizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, European Architectural Supply, Facro, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, LG, and Source 2050. And a special shout out to Partel, who is our sponsor of the week for the Passive House Accelerator this week. All right. Well, as I mentioned, Matthew Crucifix is part of the Stonewater team, and they deliver or provide housing for people in the community, sort of subsidised housing. The way that sort of public housing is done in lots of the UK, it's left up to the council, which is the sort of, I guess it's the US equivalent of a county, and they often provide cheaper accommodation and subsidised housing. And they are embarking on a project in Somerset, which they have committed to doing to Passive House, which is fantastic and really great to see people like councils doing much more than the code in terms of what they're providing for this community housing. So let's get into it. This is my chat with Matthew Crucifix.
Well, I'm joined by Matthew Crucifix, who's Director of Development at Stonewater, based in Bristol in the UK. How are you, Matthew?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. And I've got my heater on next to me. It's winter time where I am, but getting into a nice warm summer in your part of the world.
We are. We're quite lucky here for the last few weeks, but the weather's been pretty warm for England standards, up into the 30s. It's just starting to cool off a little bit with a bit of rain coming in this week, so which actually has been a bit refreshing, which has been nice.
For those not familiar with the area, can you just describe Bristol and I guess the wider area of Somerset where you do a lot of your work? Whereabouts is that, and would you characterise it?
Yeah, so Stonewater's a national housing provider in England. So we own and manage around 40,000 homes, which I'll touch on in a moment. But so I live in Bristol, which is in the southwest of England, probably about an hour and 50-minute drive west from London, and we're based probably in the sort of, like, let's say the southwest, but like the top of the southwest. So you head down into the southwest, we're probably 2 hours from Cornwall, going in a southwesterly direction, and Stonewater's got a lot of housing stock all along that southwest area in places like Somerset, so places like Bath, Taunton, Bridgewater. A lot of the areas in that location are kind of semi-rural, but we do have quite a lot of medium to large villages, market towns, and
what's the climate? How would you describe the climate?
How to describe the climate? The climate's usually, sort of mild weather, quite a lot of rain in England, but we are in a world where we're getting more extreme weather, probably in the southwest now as well. So we're getting, cooler winters, and then we're getting warmer summers for a prolonged basis. So it's an interesting, it is changing, but generally speaking, our weather will range from between kind of 10 degrees Celsius up to probably 20 for most of the year, really, other than when it's really cold.
Yeah. How did you get into the building sector?
Okay, so my background is slightly different. I've worked at Stonewater since 2010. Prior to that, I worked in broadcasting actually in England for a small radio station, and then kind of fell into affordable social housing, as we call it in England, and working in a community development team within Stonewater, and then working sort of my way up through the team, really, as a development officer and manager, securing new business opportunities, and then gradually into the role I'm in now.
Just paint the picture for us of the social housing the demand, but how does social housing work in the UK? How's it funded? What's the state of housing ownership? Just give us a bit of a top level overview.
Of course. So, the historic context probably for England, Scotland, and Wales really is that home ownership is probably key. A lot of people the majority of the country strives for home ownership. We don't have the model that you would necessarily have in places in Europe, potentially down in the southern hemisphere as well, where there's a lot more rental homes, and renting is a longer term solution for people. There's a real demand for buying housing. The housing market itself whilst there's a lot of building going on across the country, the housing market is very overheated. So in the last 20 years, house prices across most parts of England have really increased to the extent that it's really hard for people to afford to be able to buy a home. So your average earnings, a lot of the time you've got to earn sort of 15-20% times more what you're earning to be able to get a mortgage on a house to enable you to secure a property. So the need for safe and secure rented accommodation is really important. So there's also a challenge in the UK presently whereby there's a lot of open market rented or private rented, which often isn't secure for people, particularly on lower incomes. So that's where housing associations come in. So the government helps to supply funding to housing associations. So how housing associations work is where not-for-profit organisations effectively. So all of the income and funding that we generate is put back into properties. We build homes by getting bonds, financial bonds from banks, but also we're facilitated by getting funding from government via its home building or housing agency, which is Homes England. So effectively, it's a grant. So to build homes within the country, within England, it's a grant-funded model effectively, where we get grant funding from Homes England in order to help to provide the homes. But we do need to help. The grant funding that's provided doesn't fund the whole build of the property, etc. We have to mortgage that property effectively over a period of time, over a life cycle, in order to make that work.
Yeah.
So to go further back, probably around the creation of housing associations. So decades ago, council housing was created, and then in the 80s, a lot of that council housing began to be sold off through a scheme called right to buy, so people could save money effectively and buy their council housing stock. And that meant that the amount of available council housing reduced. And then what we're doing now is trying to build more homes in order to try to catch up, really, and provide more people with safe, secure rented. So when it comes to the types of homes that we deliver here at Stonewater, so we'll provide mainly what we call general needs, kind of rented housing for people whose needs aren't really met by the open market. So people who can't afford to buy a home, for example, people who may be on lower incomes, and those rents are charged are either what we call an affordable rent, which would be a sub market rental, or what we call a social rent, which is traditionally around probably 45% of the standard rents in a local area, I would say.
Yep.
So that's subsidised housing effectively, and we work with local councils and authorities to work effectively with people on a housing waiting list in order to get those people into homes, making sure they can afford to live in sort of truly safe and warm, affordable homes, really.
Is the main driver just purely delivery of lots of houses, or are there other conditions placed on any of that funding with respect to performance or environmental requirements?
So it's both really. So there's two contexts. So Stonewater as a registered housing provider or housing association, we own and manage around 40,000 homes, and that's various different tenures. So that's general needs rented. We'll have shared ownership properties. We'll have leasehold retirement living. We also have a range of foyers for young people, for example, older people housing. We have domestic violence refuges. So we've got a whole range of stock. So our core business as an organisation is to own, manage, and maintain that housing stock to a good standard, to make sure they're decent homes for all of our stock. So whilst we've got the building element in one part of the organisation, we also have another part, the vast majority of the part, which is managing the buildings that we own and manage currently, whether that's the grounds maintenance, whether that's the internal, whether that's replacing components such as roofs, windows, doors, etc., and also then managing the tenancies of the customers that are in those homes. Yep. So that's what the business is doing, and the business has a desire generally to ensure that our homes are of a decent standard, that they're safe and warm and affordable for people and sustainable for people to live in. So as part of our corporate ambition, Stonewater is aiming to ensure all of our homes are, as a minimum, EPC C by 2050, and we work with the government in order to secure funding to retrofit homes, etc. So we'll have a lot of stock. So we have a lot of housing stock in our current 40,000 homes, some of which is relatively new, some of which is older, some of which could be properties, as old as 100 years old, and we work right to either, make sure that they're all safe and warm through retrofitting, through improving the thermal efficiency of those properties, through window replacement, roof replacements, cavity wall insulation, that type of thing. So that's just the management of our stock. And then separately, we then have our new build development program, where we try to build, and we are building 1,000 homes every year. And as part of that home, we'll build those homes to a minimum of EPC B. We always do strive for EPC A in England as well. And those homes to which we receive the grant funding from government, we ultimately need to deliver within a certain funding program and ensure that they meet environmental standards, or to ensure that they meet a form of modern method of construction, for example, whether that's through modular housing or whether that's through thermal or through efficiencies in the building process, such as a form of offsite or accelerated construction.
There's a lot in there, and yes, you've got a huge stock there, and it's fantastic to see. And you've got quite a lot of information which people can go and have a look at about that retrofit program. Did you get funding for that?
We do. So you have to apply. So we've recently been successful in securing an allocation of funding from the government to help to retrofit a number of our homes.
And that's from the UK government
UK government, correct? Yeah, so they have effectively waves of funding available which you can apply for, and they're going kind of funding rounds, and you can apply to say secure a certain amount of grant funding in order to retrofit or improve a certain number of homes. However,
and what's in that? What's in that for the government? Like, what's the driver behind that funding?
So the driver really from the perspective of the government is it's not a golden bullet, so to speak, or a silver bullet in terms of solving retrofit or solving environmental efficiencies for all of the homes across the country. Ultimately, it's a pot of money where the government recognises that what it needs to do is to help housing providers, whether that's council housing or housing associations, to invest in their stock rather than disposing of it, because we're not building enough homes across the country to meet the demands of people on housing waiting lists, for example. And what would happen in a traditional housing association model is when the property reaches the point of being unsustainable in terms of an investment for us to invest in, for example, if we have to spend a huge amount of money to retrofit a home, it becomes challenging for us to do that. And that means housing associations may sell those properties. If they sell them on the open market, if we sell one home on the open market, for example, that's one less person in an affordable, secure home. So the government recognises that by helping provide some funding to support retrofit, it's meeting the aspirations of the government to increase the environmental performance of the housing stock across the country generally, whilst also retaining the amount of affordable housing or social housing stock across the country.
Do you also have a wider energy resilience concern from the government? You're an island. Is there a concern about security of energy and sort of wider geopolitical issues?
I think it's always a concern. It has been a concern more so probably in the last few years. So I mean the context of Britain's kind of energy really is obviously in the 80s and 90s. A lot of the traditional forms of energy such as coal, they've all those factories and were shut down. So we're very reliant now upon gas as a country, and gas in a lot of senses comes from supplies from other countries. So what we get then as a result, we've seen with the geopolitical issues with Russia and the war in the Ukraine is gas prices have increased hugely for people in Britain. So to the extent that prices fluctuate throughout the summer, throughout the winter, and it's quite an unsustainable way of providing energy. So the UK government, under the new government, Labour government, which has been in place for 12 months now, has been investing as a strategy to try to invest in new power stations, for example, nuclear power stations and the like, but also in new forms of energy such as wind, water, sun, etc. So there is more of an emphasis on trying to provide sustainable forms of energy, and the government is investing in those forms. I sound like I work for the government here. I don't, but it's a positive step to make the country more sustainable on its own 2 feet. And as a housing association, we have to play a part in that.
Yeah, because there's also, when you have an environmental strategy now, and in that you state that the UK housing, I think the estimate is around 14% of emissions for the country, which I assume a lot of that is from heating and space heating, water heating, and if gas is being used currently for a lot of that, then that would be contributing to a lot of those national emissions.
Yeah, that's right. So if I look out the window where I live now, it's sort of this fairly standard kind of British street. Every single property along this road has got a gas boiler in it.
Right.
Yeah, some houses have got solar panels on it, but I live in a house that's sort of 70, 80 years old. It's not very thermally efficient, and in the summer, it heats quite quickly because it's warm. It keeps the heat in, but in the winter, it doesn't keep the heat in very well at all. and the gas boiler is fully on and firing up probably from, I would say, September, depending on the point of view in the house between myself and the wife, between September and probably April or May, really.
Yeah,
So nine,
yeah.
9 months of the year we're reliant upon a set of radiators and a gas boiler, and that's the same for most people in Britain.
Yep. So tell us about Cherry Grove.
So the wider context, really, I think to Cherry Grove is, for the last 5 years at least, Stonewater's new build development programme has been focused on trying to build sustainable homes, sustainable in a sense of energy performance, but also in the sense of making sure the rents that we charge our customers are affordable for them to be able to live in those homes. So we have a drive to provide safe, warm, truly affordable homes for our customers to live in, recognizing that those customers aren't potentially on lower incomes, for example, so they're not able to potentially buy a home on the open market, or they may be people that are in different vulnerabilities, for example, traditional kind of makeup of a social housing tenant or customer in the UK, really. So for the last 5 years, we haven't been building any homes with gas boilers in them. So we've been exploring a range of different technologies, whether that be through air source heat pumps with PV panels on the roofs or solar panels on the roofs, to looking at homes that have got smart technology, for example, via infrared panelized electric heating systems, which are controlled by smartphone apps, but also then exploring how to deliver homes to passive house standard or certified passive house schemes themselves. So the main driver for us is to potentially not always be looking at the latest shiny new technology, but to be really truly looking at the fabric of that building and its thermal efficiency to make it as efficient in terms of the build, but also efficient for people and our customers to be able to use them. And one of the most efficient ways of doing that is to have less controls on things and have more thermally efficient home, where people can effectively know that they only need to press one button potentially to get it to the temperature that they like. So with the scheme at Cherry Grove, we've been working with a local developer in order to bring the scheme forward, to secure the land ultimately, to then build homes in this location. So we're building 24 homes to passive house standards. So they're passive house certified as well. So the local authority actually wanted to see passive house certified homes built on that site to help with the environmental standards of the town, but also the scheme's in a semi kind of, not an urban location, but it's located in an area quite close to the town centre. So the local town council, the local council itself, local planning authority, were aware that it needed to be a sustainable development, being close to the town centre to try to reduce footfall, but also its reliance upon, for fossil fuels, for example, as well. So the site itself, as I say, is 24 homes. They'll be extremely energy efficient, built as passive houses. We're working with a developer that's got a small SME contractor that's got a similar ethos to Stonewater in terms of trying to minimise disruption on site, in terms of utilising new technology and making sure that we can build homes quickly and efficiently. So we're using panelised systems, for example, where they'll be brought in from off-site, constructed in factory environments, brought to site, and the development will hopefully be built quicker than traditional forms as well.
Nice. So did you say that it was driven by the local authority, that they actually asked for passive house?
So we'll always work with local authorities in terms of trying to build the right development for a local area, to make sure it fits within planning need. On this site itself, due to the location of the site, there are some semi sort of commercial / industrial areas nearby, and the local authority were a bit concerned potentially about things like noise from the local area. So we've had to design the scheme in a way that it faces away from some of the more commercial areas, etc., and faces back into the residential areas in the town. As part of that, the local authority requested that we build it as a passive house as well, as part of the planning requirements.
which of course has acoustic benefits as well as more comfort and low energy
Correct.
benefits.
That's right.
Is this a first for Stonewater? Have you done any passive house projects in the past?
So it's our first truly certified passive house scheme, but we have built homes across the country that have been built to passive house standards. So,
Right.
and that has been, we've got schemes in Somerset presently that are on site that have just completed. Probably to date, we've delivered, I would say, probably in the region of probably 5 to 10 development schemes, so sites that are to passive house standard over the last 5 years. So it's an emerging kind of form of construction and technology that we're keen to try to deliver and invest more in.
How far off, like how far beyond the building code, the regular standards do you have to go to get to passive house? You require, every house requires a blower door test in the UK now, but what else do you have to do over and above what would be standard?
So it largely comes down to the air testing ultimately within the design and the build of the site. So the air tightness of the property. So it's the thermal efficiency and the air tightness. I'd need to get someone to go into the technical side of the air tightness facts and figures in order to be able to properly explain that to you. But the fabric of the building and its thermal efficiencies, I think broadly speaking, it needs to be around this additional 15 to 20% higher than building regulations within the UK housing market currently.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a step up still. Yeah,
absolutely. So what's going on in Britain presently at the moment is that in the last 18 months, the building regulation standards have changed. So the thermal efficiency, air tightness of properties has increased by the government standards, so the minimum standard has jumped up. However, we are striving to reach the government is implementing future home standard within the next few years, which will further increase the thermal performance of new build housing stock across the country. However, that said, passive house and homes built to passive house standard will still be above that threshold of the future home standard.
Right, so it's a good way to future-proof.
That's right. So we're still very much building beyond present by building homes to passive house standard or certified passive house within the UK. We're building beyond the future home standard in the country.
Yeah. How can you do that when you're financially constrained? I mean, you're a charity. Surely it costs a lot more to build to a higher standard.
It does. It does cost a lot more, but there's multiple pieces to that really. There's in terms of the nuts and bolts, we have explained earlier on. We have a grant funding program which we get secure from the government via Homes England. So it's twofold in that regard. So by building homes, either by using a form of modern methods of construction, you can access a top-up subsidy from the grant funding in order to help support that additional cost of building slightly more expensively. But we also will be modelling the development in ways whereby within Stonewater, we alongside our institutional investment that we get, we also generate our own subsidy pot. So we have our own pot of money, so to speak, that we keep by for increased environmental standards. So it's like a strategic pot of money that we have that we top up that grant funding in order to help make the build of it more viable.
Right.
But there's two things really. Quite often with things like passive house, for example, modern methods of construction, we are also building in ways, for example, within the panel systems or the wall panels are built in the factory. So they're built quicker than traditional construction. They're built in an environment with a roof over its head rather than being out in the cold, wet, windy rain, for example, in the UK trying to lay bricks, which when it rains you can't do. So what our ethos with that in terms of the construction contract is that the time and the length of time we're on site for is reduced, which reduces the cost of construction, or the amount that we're potentially having to enter into contract with. The time of construction and the preliminary costs that come with that with the developer are reduced. But by building those homes quicker, Stonewater's able to get its rental income quicker, which means that the scheme will perform well as well. On top of that, there's also the more holistic side, in that by building homes that are secure, that are more affordable for our customers to be able to pay their rent and not be victim to huge swathes of price increases or decreases and then further increases because they're built via gas, for example, our customers have a more certainty over what their energy bills are going to be each month. And ultimately, if their energy bills are stable, are secure, and they know what they're paying, that will help Stonewater in the long term, because it means that our customers are more likely to be able to afford the rent that they're being charged, because there's that control of the energy cost, and we're able to work with our customers proactively on that.
I might have put words in your mouth when I said that they surely cost a lot more. Do you know how much? Do they cost a lot more, or do you know approximately what the uplift is to get to Passive House?
Yeah, so we tend to build in and around. Well, we use square meters here. I mean, a lot of people in the UK market use per square foot, but per square meter. So on average, a home presently is costing us somewhere in a region of kind of £2,700 per square meter. For the average passive house that we're building in the country, where we're creeping up to around £3,000 per square meter, potentially 3,100 to 200. So you're looking at probably £500 per square meter at least per property. So you're adding another sort of 15%, maybe 20% on the property price to build by delivering in this way. Yeah.
And have you got any feedback? You've mentioned you've done some that are pretty close to Passive House standard or at Passive House standard. Do you collect any either qualitative or quantitative data on people living in those homes?
Yeah, so it's an emerging item for us, really, in terms of trying to learn how our customers are able to heat and live in their homes efficiently. With all the new technologies that we've been trialing actually, whether that's air source heat pumps or homes with infrared technology, we're having to gain more feedback from customers around the use, around the energy performance, around utilising. So we actually are now, in all of our homes that we build, we're putting smart monitoring sensors into the homes as well, so that we can help to detect when heating may or may not being used efficiently, whether or not there's issues with things like damp and mold and condensation. So we're installing sensors in all of our homes so that we can monitor that and try to proactively identify where there's issues before they become a problem. So we use that data in order to feedback on the performance of the homes before we then build the next set, or to incorporate that into our next set of development site approvals. But we also speak regularly to our customers and gain feedback from them in terms of usability of the heating systems, and work with them at the point that they are given the keys to their home in order to help make sure they understand how those properties work. Because quite often with new technology, particularly when there's people on lower incomes, for example, they often, and if they're not unsure about how things work, we often find that people may turn something off. So you have a mechanical heat ventilation recovery system, for example, and there's a low sort of like fan noise in a property. That's doing a job, pulling the humid air out of the property and recycling it. But we've often had cases where, because people think that's potentially using energy and costing them money when they may be on a pay as you go meter, for example, to fund their energy costs, people in the past have gone into the cupboard and turned that switch off because they're concerned about the cost. But ultimately, then you've developed a problem where we may have issues with damp and mold, for example, and we've then had to go back in and rectify that issue and talk to the customers. So we're continually trying to work with our customers to make sure that they're aware how to use the heating systems, how to make sure that they work efficiently, and proactively identify any problems. So this is also the wider benefit of Passive House, really, is that actually it's very simple. It's one control. It's heating up, it's heating down, a touch of a button. But actually there is then there is that element there is getting people used to how it works still. It's understanding that you may not have any panels or radiators in that property. It's understanding how that works in terms of potentially keeping your windows closed at certain times in order to, not necessarily be opening the windows, for example, in the really hot weather, and actually keeping the windows closed to keep the property cooler rather than letting all that heat in. So there's a lot of education that has to go into utilising those homes and making sure that they work efficiently for the customer, but work efficiently for Stonewater as an organisation as well. Nice.
So what's the timeline for Cherry Grove? When are they expected to be completed?
Well, it's a good question, because it's the developers did a great job. So I was there for we held a launch event when we sort of started on site with local councillors, and everyone came and took the photo to celebrate it starting on site. I think that was about 4 months or so ago, and there was only a few foundations in the ground. I was speaking to the contractor, Ashcott Construction, just last week, and they're sending me pictures with wall panels up and some roofs on, and nearly watertight on a good proportion of the properties. So we're hopeful that by the spring, the development site, so by the end of March 2026, the development site will be fully completed, and we'll have customers living in those homes. But I'm hoping, keep my fingers crossed, we may get them a bit sooner than that.
Nice. And I assume you've got no shortage of demand for those homes?
No, that's right. So we get the vast majority of our rented customers via local authority housing waiting lists, so that they're identified via those waiting lists, and in each of the local authority areas. So Somerset Council is the local authority in which Frome, the town, sits. The housing waiting list is in its thousands. So there's circa sort of 4,000 people, families waiting on the housing waiting list for social housing, effectively, across Somerset.
Yep, big job. All right. Hey, well, thank you very much, Matthew, and to the rest of the team at Stonewater. It's a fantastic project, and well, definitely worth keeping an eye on this one and other similar ones as well, by the sound of it, across all of the UK, of providing better, healthier, and also low carbon homes. We didn't really touch on the carbon, but it looks like you're achieving quite a lot.
And that was Matthew Crucifix, who is from Stonewater, and he's in charge of the development in Frome in Somerset, building 24 passive houses as part of their council housing project. What were your highlights from that, Mary?
Well, just first of all, it's great the organization he works for, that the local government is actually providing housing for people who can't afford market rate. I think he said 40, then general, their occupants, their residents pay 40 to 45% of the standard rent in a local area. Like, a wonderful program that we certainly don't have the equivalent of here. We have affordable housing, but nothing in between.
It's relatively common across the UK. Councils often do provide some housing that is subsidised for people, but it can be anything from pretty awful flats in large concrete towers. This is really encouraging to see that they're meeting that. I guess it is an obligation or responsibility to look after those people, but doing it in a better way, that they've seen the benefit of doing it to passive house.
Absolutely. I mean, right, as you say, it's one thing to provide social housing, but it's another thing to provide high quality social housing. And very exciting that the passive house market in the UK is so developed at this point that you can find examples of council housing providers who are doing passive house.
Yeah. And we've seen that with the likes of Emma Edmondson, who was a real leader in this space with the work that she did. And it's exciting that others are taking that on. You've talked to the likes of Barratt Group here, which is really well known to a lot of people in the UK. They're one of the largest builders of houses for the private market. And I think both of those are examples of organisations that are seeing the benefits of passive house from an economic perspective. In the case of the community council housing, Emma's talked about this, that they retain those assets. They continue to own them. So the benefit for them of providing product is multifaceted, really, because the building is going to last longer because it's going to be drier and not require as much maintenance. So it's not going to degrade as quickly. But I always recall Emma talking about the fact that when you provide homes that are decent and healthy and quiet and just a nice place to be, people tend to respect that and look after them. So they found that anecdotally their vandalism rates have gone way down as well when they stepped up the quality of performance. They're still not luxury. I mean, these are decent homes, but they're not mansions. So they're moderate size, but they just perform well. And I've heard this talked about this week while I've been in the UK about this, the need for safe, healthy and sustainable homes. Well, they use the word decent, actually, so safe and decent homes. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because it kind of highlights that that's not necessarily a guarantee if you just build to the building code or the normal regulations. So, providing decent homes is what they are aiming for, and Passive House enables them to do that.
And you mentioned, moisture proofing and how important that is in a climate where there's a lot of moisture. And he mentioned that even though I don't think of England as a particularly harsh climate, that he has the gas boiler on in his own home from September to probably April or May, 9 months of the year. So having a passive house is, cutting down is definitely going to shrink the number of months where you need the gas boiler on, or any sort of heat source. Which, given the fuel prices in the UK, is really going to make a huge difference.
It's surprisingly damp in this part of the world. They have had flooding, but it's also quite humid, which I guess surprised me, because I just associate humidity with warmer places. But it's quite a damp environment, and there are a lot of houses. Like, I've been staying with my uncle, and he lives in a house that's more than 100 years old, and it's just flagstones on the floor directly on the ground, and it's just accepted that there's going to be rising damp, and because the ground there is quite low lying, and you have moors and villages built near waterways, so there's just a lot of moisture in the ground, and so dampness is something that is a real challenge. And if you can build that in a way that not only prevents the rain from coming in from the outside, but also helps keep the house dry in the inside, and with good ventilation and good vapor control, that's going to have a massive impact on people's lives. The other thing I've noticed, because you're right, the gas boilers are the standard in this part of the world, and a lot of the homes that I've been into, everyone has carbon monoxide monitors, which I find quite scary, that they need to have carbon monoxide monitors inside their homes, because they have a gas boiler often inside the home. Like, a lot of times it's in the kitchen, or it's in the laundry, or it's somewhere inside the building envelope. Mostly they're flued to the outside, but these monitors are check that there's no leaks or anything, or the the pilot flame hasn't gone out or something like that, and it's just leaking into gas. So anything that they can do to improve the energy efficiency, and then of course electrify those homes, get rid of the gas, and not have the gas boilers, is going to have a massive impact on not just the durability, but also people's health.
Right, absolutely. I mean, Yeah, the indoor air quality is a real issue with homes that have been built so long ago,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
damp rising through the floor. Ooh, sounds
Yeah.
very chilly.
And I know that the ventilation is something that a lot of these council housing providers are grappling with, because that is one of the challenges. And I've seen these conversations happen where you get a designer, someone like Matthew, who's really on board with Passive House, but he needs to convince his asset managers and other people in that organisation who are going to be responsible for the continual maintenance and looking after those buildings, because they have to, you're adding stuff that they have to go and do, like change the filters. And you can't always easily get into these buildings because it's someone's private space, and there's all sorts of rules about what you're allowed to do with tenants and going into the home. So there are people thinking about how they can basically have a good ventilation system with filters that is almost invisible, or if it is invisible for the occupants of that home, but still be able to maintain it.
Right. Passive House certainly has reduced maintenance in a lot of ways, but yeah, replacing those
It's not
filters.
zero. It's not zero maintenance.
Right. It's not zero. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So, well, really exciting stuff. And as we've talked about, and we'll probably continue to talk about, some really exciting stuff happening in this space, I think, from a policy point of view, but also from just these organisations realising that the wider benefits and also the financial benefits of doing Passive House. And I think that's going to be a real sort of game changer for Passive House in this part of the world, which I'm hoping will filter through to the rest of us as well. In your part of the world, Mary, and also certainly in my part of the world down in Australia and New Zealand.
Absolutely. The joys of working in a more mature Passive House market.
Yes, we'd like to think so.
We'd like that to filter down to
Yes.
us here.
Yeah, and hopefully not take too long. All right, well, we've got this week coming up at the Passive House Accelerator. It is a component spotlight with Cascadia. Always good to hear about new doors and windows that are out there and what's coming. So check that out. As always, go and have a look at all the great articles, heaps of great resources at the Accelerator. And also, if you haven't already, go and check out Reimagine Buildings. Some fantastic resources in there, and membership is well worthwhile. Thank you very much, Mary. Really appreciate it.
Great to see you again. And again, enjoy the UK conference.
Yeah.
Sure, it's going to be great.
Well, thank you. And thanks all for listening. We'll be back again next week on Passive House Podcast.